Okay, I just want to make sure everybody's settled. Welcome everyone to our town hall. We are highlighting these three fantastic women. They are women veterans of distinction. I am Lauren Brooks. I am a host on 1010XL, which is the local sports talk radio station. We are the flagship station for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the local affiliate of the Florida Gators as well. So I am super happy to be here. Really appreciate Mike having me, and I will be the moderator today. So that way you get to hear a lot more from these women. We are here at the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic at Centerstone in Jacksonville, Florida. The Cohen Clinic at Centerstone is honored to provide outpatient mental health services for post 9/11 veterans, National Guard, Reserve, active duty, and all military families. The clinic is located at 7011 AC Skinner Parkway, and the phone number is 904-431-3500. This town hall is being sponsored by generous support from CSX and from Boeing. As part of celebrating our nation's military around Veterans Day, we chose to highlight the accomplishments of three extraordinary women who all achieved flag rank in the military. That means they worked diligently to become an admiral or general. The format of this town hall is that I will be asking our panelists a series of questions, and then at the end, we will leave about 15 minutes for Q&A. If you have questions here, I'll take them live. And then we also have people watching online, so you can submit your questions in the chat. Before I ask each of the panelists to talk about their careers, I will first provide a short bio for each of them. Starting on my left, Vice Admiral retired Mary Jackson retired in July 2020 after over 3 decades of service in the United States Navy. She began her career as a surface warfare officer serving on and off Navy warships, achieving command of USS McFall. Admiral Jackson subsequently went on to command the Navy's largest Navy base, Naval Station Norfolk, and other duties prior to achieving flag rank. Upon selection as a flag officer, she served in Shore Installation, Regional, and Enterprise-wide Navy Installations Command, assignments ultimately accountable for $7.5 billion and 53,000 personnel, executing efficient and effective operational material and personnel programs for 71 Navy installations across 10 regions, providing global support to the Navy and joint forces. Very impressive, if I say so myself. Well done, thank you. Rear Admiral retired Patricia Wolfe served 32 years in the United States Navy on active duty and in the Navy Reserve, retiring in 2013 at the rank of Rear Admiral upper half. Her career includes a number of first assignments that helped break the gender barrier for women in the Navy, including assignment at sea in 1982 aboard the USS Piedmont, and assignment as the first female commanding officer of a Navy cargo handling battalion in 1994. Admiral Wolfe was promoted to flag rank in 2008 and served as the Deputy Commander for Logistics in the U.S. Pacific Fleet. In 2009, she assumed command of the 4,300 sailors assigned to the Navy Expeditionary Logistics Support Group, overseeing training, readiness, deployment, and operations worldwide, including Afghanistan and the Middle East. Her final flag assignment was with the Defense Logistics Agency, where she served as the J9 Director of the DLA Reserve Force and Interim Commander of DLA Troop Support. Brigadier General retired Valeria Gonzalez-Kerr retired with a total of 32 years of service in the U.S. Army. She served in the Florida National Guard as the Assistant Adjutant General Support and the Florida Department of Military Affairs State Quartermaster. In October 2015, she became the first Hispanic female to reach the rank of Brigadier General in the Florida Army National Guard. During her tenure as an officer, General Gonzalez-Kerr successfully deployed as commander of the 927th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion to Iraq in 2007. After her promotion to colonel, she had the privilege to serve as commander of the Homestead-based 50th Regional Support Group, comprised of almost 2,000 soldiers stationed throughout the state of Florida. In addition to her distinguished military career, General Gonzalez-Kerr also held multiple high-level civilian positions. That is enough of me talking about all of you. Now I would like you to talk about you, starting with Mary. Please add more to that.
Thank you. Thanks for getting through all that. I know it's like a tongue twister, isn't it?
Deep breaths.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
I don't know that there's that, as we go through our conversation, we'll be able to talk a lot more. I think that one of the things that I always loved when I had the opportunity to listen to panels for other people was to hear kind of the soft side. And so you heard kind of the official bio piece, but I'm married. I have a fabulous husband. Next year we have our 30-year anniversary, and we have 2 children that are, one's still in college and one's a graduate from college. And so that's a big part of kind of who I am and how my path has been navigated as I've gone along. So I feel really proud. I miss serving with sailors every day. I see a lot of familiar veterans and sponsors and support here in the room. So it's great to see so many fabulous faces, but I'm looking forward to the conversation. And so I'll turn it over to Patty, I guess.
Like Mary, sometimes it's good to hear a little different side of what we do. I always start with, I joined the Navy for this money, for the scholarship that the Navy gave me. So the question on why you join is not, the right question is why I stayed. And it was all about the sailors and the mission after the initial 4 years when I paid back my scholarship. There were opportunities that would never have happened to me on the civilian world in the 80s and early 90s. The military has truly been an equal opportunity employer. I got paid and just as much as the guy working next to me. Opportunities sometimes became an issue for women, and we'll get into that later, where the ships weren't necessarily open and then there were no career paths further on. But I loved every minute I did. My mother would never have thought that I'd be wearing combat boots and deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. When she thought I was going to the Navy, she had the Waves version of it, a little pretty skirt and my heels and sit behind a desk. So I think my mom was probably a little more concerned about it than I was when I got deployed a number of times. Like Mary, I have a husband, 27 years. I have 2 sons, the youngest of whom is a Navy Chief Petty Officer, a cryptologic technician. And so we share lots of information back and forth, as much as he can tell me now, being a Crippy. But I'm looking forward to the conversation to see what everybody has to say and where your interests lie.
Well, I joined the active duty active duty Army because I felt that need that I wanted to serve. It was part of my grandfather was in the Army, my father was in the Air Force, so I kind of felt like that was my career path. So I saw the people in the ROTC walking around with their uniforms, and I'm like, I think I want to do that. So I joined. I did that. And then I spent 3 years on active duty in Germany. Loved every minute of it. It's a second lieutenant with no responsibilities and driving the fast car and going everywhere through Europe. It was amazing. And then I got out and I missed it. And I was living in Miami, and a recruiter said, why don't you just come back? And I'm like, I'm not going back. It's okay. And I gave him all these he said, well, if I can find a unit, would you join me? I said, sure, I'll join you. I want a captain's position. It has to be airborne because I went to airborne school after I graduated from basic. And then it has to be a quartermaster position, and it has to be about, no more than 10 miles away from me. So, okay. He said, that's fine. I gave him that challenge, and I figured, it's never going to happen. Lo and behold, 3 months later, he found me a unit in the Florida National Guard and down in Miami, exactly what I wanted. He found that for me. So that's how I joined the Florida National Guard. And I was privileged so I was a traditional soldier when I first joined in, and I worked for the Hilton Hotels, and I, got promoted through the Hilton Hotels. And then I got the opportunity to join the active duty within the Florida National Guard. And that's like the best of both worlds, it's like, whew. So I got a chance to do that. And of course, I went through all my leadership positions and all the schooling and everything else until, I got to work with Mike Fleming. I got promoted to be the assistant chief of staff, and he was the 1-star on the floor at the time. So him and I worked for a long time together. And, and then he was actually the previous commander of the 927th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion that I commanded when I took it to Iraq. So, those are my different items that we had after that, came back and got promoted again, and the different other positions. And within, I was also the human resources officer for the Florida National Guard. One of the best jobs I ever had in my entire life. I tell you, dealing with people, it's tough, but it's one of the best things to do. And then, of course, I got promoted to flag officer, and the rest is history. After I got out, I got the privilege of working for Mike Fleming again at Jacksonville University. So connections. That's one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later on today. So thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Mary, what would you say was the biggest challenge as far as being a female in the military?
You know, I guess I'm going to push back on the question a little
Sure.
bit, because when I think about my biggest challenges, I don't associate them with gender. I mean, there were definitely challenges in serving. I mean, it's hard work. You got to really focus. There certainly are some gender dynamics, right? Being a mom and deploying was one of them. And I think that there's probably some leadership differences that, you know, there are some generalities and stereotypes about how women may lead a little bit more maternally maybe, and how they communicate differently. So those were aspects, you know, part of the landscape of my service. But the challenges I don't associate with gender. I just associate with being, you know, focused and hard jobs and jobs that matter, right? And all the challenges are all very human, right? Taking care of service members, bringing them home safe. Those were when I think about my highest highs and my lowest lows of my time in the service, almost all of them had to do with kind of the aspect of leadership and leading that team and individuals, you know, to accomplish the mission, which is really what we were set to do.
How old were your kids when you deployed?
So our son was 1.5 and our daughter was 5.
Wow.
And there were definitely some, you know, that's tough. I think I carried more mom guilt with that than they were affected or my husband was affected. And it's something you kind of have to learn how to communicate across, you know, that time difference. I remember one of the hardest things was when I first went to sea, you couldn't pick up a phone and call home, right? You could maybe go through a radio operator occasionally, but that was it, or send a message. But by the time I commanded a ship, you could pick up a phone and call home. And I remember kind of the first time I called, afterwards, my husband said, don't call unannounced, because it would take him about 24 hours to get the kids back to normal, because it just threw them off their routine. And that's a pretty hard thing to hear as a mom. Like, don't call. Patty, you
Can
have
I
an
add
issue?
to that a little bit? I didn't get the don't call right after 9/11. I deployed to Egypt for 3 months because the Bright Star was still going on, but I came back and did the next year over in Tampa at U.S. Central Command. I was close enough to go home every few weeks. And my husband, when I got home, I tried to clean and do everything. And he finally sat me down and he said, you're not here. The kids will be fed. The kids will be clothed. They'll be wearing clean clothes. Maybe not the ones you would have dressed them in, but they're going to be okay. So the challenge of leaving home, and he said, don't try to run the house from afar, because I got it my way. I'm not going to do it your way. So that was very interesting for me. But the mom guilt was there, yeah. But they were incredibly proud of what I was doing also. So they would tell all their family, all their friends, that my mom's a soldier, and they forget about it. You know, I was in the Navy, but they call me soldier because I was wearing combat boots and camouflage. And, so that worked out okay too.
Do you want to add to that? Val?
So a little bit from what you said, my kids were in 3rd grade and 5th grade when I deployed. And I remember, you know, I was not close enough, of course, but I remember coming back home and standing in the middle of the kitchen, and my husband is doing something and the kids are doing this and the other one's putting stuff over there. And I'm standing there going like, they don't need me. You know, they've been doing all this by themselves. It's like, where do I fit here now? You know, it's just after you're coming back after a year of being gone. So you feel that guilt is like, you know, you feel proud that they can do everything themselves, but it's like, oh my gosh, no, they don't need me anymore. But anyway, they integrated me really well. You know, after that, it was like, okay, no, Mom, we do need you. And I got back my regular roles. But yeah, I remember feeling those same feelings of guilt too. So
I think it was an advantage to not focus on gender. I mean, I'd be curious what your thoughts are, right? I mean, you're in kind of a male-dominated environment.
Absolutely.
I mean, any thoughts from you in terms of how you've approached that?
Sure. I think some people think that I have my job just because I'm a female, and this radio station wanted to diversify, and so therefore let's hire a woman, and she may not know that much about sports. And so usually when I first meet people and I say I work for 1010XL, if they know what it is, then they'll say, oh, so you're in sales. I'm like, I do that as part of my job. But I also talk about sports on the radio. And then that's when it's like, no, you don't. Women don't talk about sports. And so then if they're not familiar with the radio station, I talk them through. Actually, I'm not the only one. For the first 5 years that I worked there, I was the only female on Monday through Friday, but we have an all-female sports talk radio show that was the first in the country, which is really cool. And now there's another female that's on Monday through Friday also. So we're growing, but it's definitely different to be viewed as an outsider. But I'm glad to hear that the military wasn't like that. What would you say as far as the changes for women? You alluded to that earlier, Mary, as far as there weren't a lot of females in positions that you could look up to.
I was very fortunate in terms of my timing, because when I graduated from the Naval Academy, there had just been some changes that allowed women to go on a set of ships that previously women were not able to serve on. And kind of I had something similar happen in 1994 when the repeal of the combat exclusion law happened. So previously I could only serve on logistic ships. And then in 94, I could go on to cruisers and destroyers. And so I was very fortunate for the timing to be as it was, but also for there to be women and role models ahead of me that had laid, the initial path from women first serving on ships in the first place. And if you think about how we've come even in the past, 5 years with women now able to serve on submarines and do a lot more with special forces, certainly in the Army with, you see a lot in the media with Ranger School, women going through Ranger School now. So I think that there are more opportunities available. You'll never get the same numerical statistics of women in the service as you do out in the outside world, and I think that's okay. It is what it is. But I think the opportunities are there, and I think role models are important. I think in your example, you're a role model to women who would be interested in doing what you're doing, and so we've all been in a situation where younger junior officers or enlisted have talked to us, and so that's another kind of collateral duty we all own.
One of the, as Mary said, one of the collateral duties, once we made flag, I assume for Valeria, it's the same, we were encouraged to be visible on the waterfront, go down, even if your job didn't ask you or need you to be there, to make sure you put your uniform on if you happen to be in the area, because the young women and even the young men would come to you and go, oh my God, I've never seen a female admiral. Never met one before. And I still have that to this day, not
That's
as
true.
much, but we were encouraged to be very visible so that our young up and coming sailors could see that it was possible.
I think that's important because role models are to be visible, because if you don't know about them, even if they're serving behind the scenes, that doesn't necessarily help you. Valeria, what about you?
I agree, the same thing. And one of the things that one of my mentors, again, he was a traveling general in the Florida National Guard. He was always on the go, always on the go. And that's one of the things that I learned from him, and I pass on to a lot of my the people that ask me this question is presence. Your presence is important so that people know that, one, you care, and two, that they can see, like you say, role models, they can see that you can be there. And male and female, it doesn't matter, because I have the current battalion commander for the 927th that we discussed. He calls me all the time and he asks me questions, and he says, hey, I remember that somebody said that you did this a long time ago. Why did you do it and how, and stuff like that. So, male and female, it doesn't matter. It's you being there and you being able to answer their questions, and just presence is huge for everybody to see you.
You all mentioned deployments. What were the challenges of leadership? How do I'll start with you as far as deployments are concerned?
As I deployed with the battalion, took my battalion forward, the challenge there was making sure that they were all ready. By that time, they knew who I was. They knew who my senior enlisted were. But I will tell you that I was so surprised at the number of sailors whose families weren't ready after we got there, and the numbers we had to send back to take care of a problem with the spouse, a problem with the children. We did the best we could. So the challenge for me, it was getting the sailors ready and their families ready. Personally, integrating into the leadership positions during the deployment, which in all of mine were almost exclusively male. So there were a number of social programs for that cigar smoking around the pit that I just didn't want to join in. It wasn't my thing. So some of that trying to figure out how to be part of the leadership group as a professional responsibility, and then trying to figure out how to be part of that leadership group on a social, because so much gets done around the fire pit, so many decisions. So I struggled sometimes during deployments to get into the social piece so that when deployed, because there was nobody else to hang out with.
Sure. I think in the way I would equate that to is golf. I feel like because so many women don't play golf, they get left out of those types of meetings, corporate events, things like that. Valeria, what about you?
So during my deployment, it was a lot of fun because my battalion had dual mission. We had the logistical mission, and then we had the convoy security mission. And so as a logistician battalion, and I had an infantry company and an armor company assigned to me so that they can do the security missions. And as soon as the guys came on board and they, came to my office to say, who they are, the first thing that they said very politely is like, we have never worked for a woman in our lives. We don't know what it is to work for a woman. And not only was me, but my command sergeant major, she was a female, and my SPO, my support operations officer, she was a female also. So they were very confused and they were already traumatized, the fact that they had 3 women that they had to work for. But I told them, I said, it's this here, U.S. Army, and we're all dressed up the same way. Yours is bigger than my uniform is smaller, but we're the same. So trust me, by the end of the deployment, you won't know that there are females here. We're all the same. It's just, we're all soldiers. And lo and behold, by the end of the deployment, that's exactly what both of them came and they told me. We had to have a lot of conversations, sometimes behind the closed doors, and some stronger conversations in some areas too. But at the end of the deployment, they were like, okay, I understand. And they were actually worried that there was going to be a female in the rating scheme. And when you look at the evaluation report, there was going to be a name of a female there. But actually, one of the guys came to the Florida National Guard from Virginia, and because my name was there, he actually got the job because, there was a connection there that they knew. So he was very proud, and he still calls me and tells me, thank you for having brought him to Florida. So, yeah.
I love that. Mary, what about leadership challenges?
So I think as a junior officer, when you're deployed, you're in your element. That's what you've been training to do, and you're part of a team. And when you see that all come together, it's pretty exhilarating. It's very rewarding, and it's fun, but it's very rewarding. When you are the captain of a ship, you're accountable to bring everyone home. And I really felt that like every minute of command. And part of that was prior to deployment, meeting with a family readiness group, which was predominantly women, the wives of the men on the ship. And that was hard going into that meeting, because I had to build their confidence that I was going to bring everyone home, and that's what I was solely focused on. But I think that also helped frame my perspective in terms of command. So you carry that weight with you no matter what. And it's not just ships. It's other deployment scenarios, but that was my experience. I think the other thing I would comment on is some of the things that have already been mentioned, which is when you're at the top, it can get kind of lonely, and you have to figure out who your trusted advisors are, but you also can't let your defenses down so much that you become vulnerable. So there's this kind of fine line between, searching out and having trusted advisors who can tell you when something's not right, but also making sure that you still maintain your positional authority as a leader. And so that's important. And, when we went in port, usually there would be a few group of people that, you could hang out with. But I wasn't bashful. I would find the spa, or I would go do something that was important for me because I knew, and it's something that I talk a lot about, is finding that balance. And we tend to, this is another gender generalization, but as women, we tend to put ourselves last, right? We'll put the crew first. We'll put, our seniors first. We'll put our family first, and then we'll forget about ourselves. And that can be, there can be health implications associated with that. So working out, yoga, whatever you need to stay resilient spiritually, mentally, and physically. And sometimes the best time to do that is when a ship pulls into port, when you can kind of detach and say, okay, I'm gonna get reset. Or it can be when you're underway and you go up and, run the deck or whatever it is, but you got to make sure you find times to recharge, which I think are really important, and take care of yourself, really important.
Patty, when you decided to retire, how was the transition?
Okay. Nice enough for us is we always know when the retirement's happening most times. So yeah, I knew it was coming and I was ready for it. However, the transition from being able to put my uniform on every day or even every weekend, if I was still doing the reserve stuff, trying to figure out how to slow down. And I've been retired about 8 or 9 years now, and then figure out where you want to put your energies professionally. And I'm very fortunate is that I try to be more retired than anything else. And my energies are very much nonprofit and I don't work for pay at the moment. And so I'm very, very fortunate from that perspective that we're good to go. Figuring life out in the future, but you have to have a plan and you have to know what you want to do. You also have to, I had to go through a few different nonprofit boards to figure out where my passions lie. On that one. My husband and I do travel 4 or 5 months a year in various different ways. And so that's been my lifesaver is when I get home for 3 or 4 months, I'm like, I got to do something. And I appreciate being the opportunity to be here today.
Of course, I would think that traveling is nice, but you probably also feel that sense of value from the nonprofit.
Oh, I do. And it's nice that you'll be able to, I'm able to pick and choose the nonprofits I want to work for the things that I'm passionate about. So we're all comparing notes on what nonprofits we're on. We're all looking for help on our nonprofits, and we can all say no because we're already at our bandwidth, or we're not. That's not what I want to do. That's not where I want to put my time, talent, and treasure, which is what a nonprofit asks for. So it's been really interesting. Is 8-10 years past my retirement. From the United States military and my retirement from what civilian jobs I was working on, to be able to choose the things I really want to do and choose how much I want to be involved.
Yeah, that's really the perfect balance. Valeria, how about you? When it came to retirement, was that an easy transition?
It's scary. I have to, just be blunt that it is. But most of us have either been in some type of career and then we have to switch from one to the other. And so we already know what that's all about. So the feeling that you had whenever you were getting out or you were moving from one place to the other. But I think Mary mentioned it. But if you are spiritually in a good place, you can do anything. And that was key for me to be able to move from one place to the other, and being well in my faith and actually growing it. That was one of the best things for retirement, is that I could actually grow there spiritually a lot more. So yeah, but then again, I had a great mentor that helped me out. I keep looking at him because he is. I mean, he's amazing. He's the most active person, the general retired person that I've ever met in my life, and I try to do a little bit of what he does, but I can never keep up with him. So, yeah.
Mary.
So I think no matter what pay grade you are when you leave the service, there's a bit of a transition, just in terms of vocabulary and understanding cultures and translation of what your skills in the military bring to the civilian sector. And so I think we all wrestle with that a little bit. Many resources, different nonprofits and veterans association or veterans Department of Veterans Affairs, who helps with that transition, but it has to be very intentional. It doesn't just happen, right? I think that, I've chosen to not go back full-time, but to still do some stuff in the corporate world. So I'm doing a little bit of stuff in the corporate world and also nonprofits, and I find that really exciting. I love the diversity of that and the learning, the continuous learning, because I think that's something that also, is part of what gets baked into you as a service member, is you're always learning. And the other thing about leaving the service is you miss the people, but you've trained your relief. So you don't really feel like you left an organization hanging necessarily, so that you don't have that aspect of it. And then you get to you get discretionary time and choices that you might not have had, which is really, really special. So, and I'm on the board of the Cohen Military Veteran Clinic here. And so that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about, I think is so very important. So if I can just say a few minutes on that, which I think, we talked about deployment. One of the first times I went to a counselor was right before I deployed, because I started having these panic attacks that I wasn't going to come home. I'm getting choked up. But I think that there still is, there's still a little bit of a bumpy landscape that our service members navigate with regards to getting care and counseling, mental health support. And one of the things that was in my portfolio in charge of Navy Installations Command were counselors on the bases that were available for our service members and their families, as well as the hospitals, right? I wasn't responsible for the hospitals, but the hospitals provided that care as well. But there's just not enough of it, right? And there's not enough diversity of options for people, if they don't feel comfortable going into that clinic on a base or going into where my counselors in Fleet and Family Service Center. So things like, these additional resources like what Cohen Military Veteran Clinic provide, which is access to care, I think is critically important, and that's not going away. I mean, I think that's, and it can be for something like, I'm anxious about going on a deployment to the more significant needs of care that some of our service members and families need. So I'm a huge advocate for it. I'm very thankful. General, you can't say no to General Fleming when he asks you to do something, but it is super special when it's something you care about. And so I want to just take a moment to talk about that, because I think our service members should tap into that and should be able to do it in a way that they're comfortable.
Mental health is something that certainly has become more public, but for the longest time, it was something I think that was taboo to discuss. Were you encouraged to go talk to a counselor? Like, how did you think this is something that I should do before I deploy?
I guess I just knew it in my core that it was something to do. I was a little nervous because that was before I got into the base installation business. And so I was a little nervous walking into Fleet and Family Service Center with an appointment. But it was the right thing to do. It was very helpful. And so I think that it just, as leaders, you need to encourage service members to tap into that resource because it's there for them. And so I don't know, what was your exact question?
Well, I think some people would be afraid that they're going to be viewed as weak if they need counseling before deployment, because you're supposed to be not just a leader, but also obviously very brave and courageous.
Yeah.
And
No, I think
I
that's
was
true.
gonna say that you may not know how many people you actually helped by just being there. So people saw you walk into that office and they probably said, if she's coming in, that means that it's okay. So you probably helped a lot more people than you helping yourself, but probably helped a lot more people than you probably know.
Well, that's a good point. It gets back to my opening thing about kind of the soft underbelly
Mhm.
for all of us. I think it's so important when you get the opportunity to mentor someone, don't just tell them about the work stuff, right? Because men and women alike are navigating all sorts of things, right? Parenting, ailing parents they're trying to take care of. I mean, who knows what's going on in people's lives? I mean, that's part of, the human aspect of this world. And so having those conversations, you never know who you'll affect. And that's one of the biggest validations that I find today In fact, I had something happen recently a week ago where someone said, you won't remember this, but you did this.
Mhm.
And it was one of those things about helping someone take care of something going on in their life.
And I'll say that's a leadership by example type of thing. Just a quick personal story is I had my sister's husband passed away the day before a conference I was running. And I could not go to my sister. So I actually did my opening speech via, and before 9/11, via some sort of telephone thing. And I was hoping it was going over well with 400 people in the room that I couldn't see and who couldn't see me. You would not believe the number of comments I got after that from people who were in the room that said, we were so glad that you went home, you didn't stay for this conference. And that was leadership by example, that family comes first. So many of us, and probably the three of us, have all had a point where we wish we'd stayed with the family, and when we could have, that certain things might have happened, that my kid with chicken pox, I wish I'd been able to stay home with them and just canceled the 2 days worth of work. And, some of us didn't do that, so.
Well, you said, Mary, about how you train the people under you, but there are times that regardless of what either company or military service you work for, where you feel indispensable, like they can't live without me, but you probably learn eventually, wait, no, things will go on, I can delegate and everything will survive. The role of the National Guard and Reserve has increased significantly since 9/11. So for both of you, what changes have you seen, and how do you think people are able to balance everything like we've been talking about?
You want to start?
Go ahead.
Since 9/11, the not 2 days a month and 2 weeks a year doesn't exist. And every reservist is told now, you better plan for some sort of mobilization in the first 5 years you're a reservist, if not 3. So it's a totally different game changer. But what I will say is that the reserve component that has stuck it out, the sailors, soldiers that are still there, are totally and utterly committed. It's not just extra money. It's not just fun on weekends, because they know the reality of what they do is important to the security and this country's existence. So it's changed the dynamic a lot. Family readiness for reservists has become huge. The technology that we use, Zooms, has really contributed to our ability, to their ability to do things at 7 o'clock after they come home from their full-time job. It's more and more and more important. And both the services, all 4 services, are getting smaller, along with the reserve component. So it becomes more the fact that they have to be more and more integrated to make the whole thing work overall.
Yeah, I think the resilience of our soldiers and all of our troops in the reserves and the National Guards is just amazing, because like she said, we're deploying all the time. And as you get promoted, you may have deployed with this unit, but then you get promoted to this other unit, and that one's getting ready to go. So the families are very resilient, and the employers also. I mean, we have very, very great employers that help and support our families and our deployed troops. So it is our way of life now, and I think the entire nation has kind of embraced it, and that's just the way things are now, and we're happy for it now. So,
Patty, you mentioned that your son is also in the Navy. Were you terrified at all about that?
No.
Okay.
He was headed for his junior year of college, decided he wasn't going to do that, and called my husband and I and said, I'm joining the family business. Because my husband's retired Navy too. So I was, and this is one of the things I wasn't home for, is I wasn't there to swear him in. My husband took him down because I was deployed when this happened. So I think as he gets more senior now and some of the things he's doing, I may be a little more worried, but that's the mom thing, but I'm very, 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 very proud of him.
Absolutely. This question will be my final one until we take questions from the audience. So elaborate as much as you want to with the answer. Mary, I'll start with you. If you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Yeah, this is a hard question. I think it's be comfortable being uncomfortable, and don't let the little gremlins in your head get to you. because we can psych ourselves out pretty easily.
Mhm.
I'm not good enough for that. I can't do that. What are people thinking? And if you can just kind of let that stuff go and know that you're going to be uncomfortable, but that you can do it. You've been trained to do it. You can do it. And if you fail, it's okay, right? Get back up, get back at it. But be comfortable being uncomfortable.
I love that. Patty?
I would say be prepared for change. Since I joined the Navy in 1981, the things have changed. Women have gone to sea. Women are in command. We have flag officers. I am currently mentoring a young lady who just reported to a submarine. Asked her last week, I said, how's it going? She goes, I'm not sure what I got myself into. Well, I think probably every submariner says that.
Right.
But she's, this is her first submarine coming off of the Bonhomme Richard of all places, which was the ship that burned. So she had a rough first tour. Be prepared for change because the world is going to change. The combat exclusion law, something else is going to happen. And watch for the opportunities you never saw coming. Somebody threw a curveball at you from left field and you're like, I never ever thought I'd ever think about doing that. And it might be the best opportunity. I was the beneficiary of some of those, and there were some that I just couldn't deal with when they came at me. But opportunity, look for the opportunities.
Good stuff. Valeria?
I would say to remember that, yes, you can. That's one of my favorite sayings is that you can do it. You can do it, male or female, it doesn't matter. Yes, you can. And stay very positive. Because if you have a positive attitude, it's contagious, and people are going to want to be with you. People are going to want to work with you because, bad things are going to happen. And if you take it with a good attitude, then you can move them along and progress. But if you have the bad attitude, it makes it ugly for everybody, and nobody wants to be around you. Nobody wants to come to work, and I've been in those situations. It's like, got to change this around. So the power of positivity is it works. It truly works.
I would say one of the co-hosts, the main co-host of the show that I'm on, his advice, not just to his younger self, but to everyone, is be nice to people. It's not hard to just be nice to people. And at the end of the day, you'll look back and go, okay, as long as I was nice to people, whether I failed at my role or my task, as long as I was nice to people.
So what's your
Advice to my younger
Yeah.
self? Oh, goodness. I would say,
She's
not
too
prepared.
young.
Not prepared for this. I would say be bold, because as a child, I was probably pretty shy, and I might have missed out on getting into the role that I'm in now much sooner. So I graduated from college and took a job in the corporate world, and I was miserable after about 7 years. And that's when I left there, and I started just part-time at the radio station and worked as a producer, and long story short, I'm where I am now. But I think had I told people when I was younger, I want to work in sports, even though at that time there were no women in sports talk radio. Women were always on the sidelines, and I have no interest in television whatsoever. I don't want to ask, other than today when I'm asking questions, I don't want to just ask a question. I want to be able to give my opinion. So I never wanted to work in TV. And there literally were no women in sports talk radio. And so, but had I said that to somebody at age 17, I want to work in sports talk radio, maybe the path would have come faster, and I'd be a little ahead of where I am today. But certainly glad to be where I am today at the same time. All right, questions from the audience, and I'll be monitoring the chat. Yes, please, go right
I
ahead.
have two. If there were a high-paying executive level position that you could work remotely, would you be interested? I'm a recruiter.
I know you too well, Penny, on that one.
There is with COVID sequestration, amazing positions remote, and pay scales have gone through the roof, and there's no ageism, and there aren't enough executives. So I wanted to throw that out there. You all have my number, so you can call me. Now, the other important question for today is, I'm on the board with the Northeast Florida Women Veterans Association, and Admiral Wolfe is our chair. And I love working with her. She's doing a phenomenal job. And thank you, Hammer, for putting your blessing on our contribution from the state. We really appreciate that. What I want to know because I'm really becoming familiar with women veterans who weren't officers, who were in 20 and 30 years, who a percentage of them don't even put veteran on their resume.
Mhm.
Why? I'm trying to understand and help them and help them see what they bring to the employment market. You know, leadership, team building, working in a diverse environment, but why are they so, quote, ashamed of serving? I know there was challenges, but I'm trying to understand this, and why are these women that way?
Just wanna start?
I'll take that first because Penny's talking my
Right.
world, but we used to say as women that we didn't want to be seen as different. We are one of the guys. Okay. Women, military, soldiers, sailors, airmen are different. We are physically different. We are emotionally different.
Right.
And it took a lot of time in the military for the powers that be, and I remember very vividly when Admiral Roughhead had wanted to have an all-female meeting, all-female flag officers meeting. And we all went, I'm not different. I'm not different. We are not special, but we are physically and emotionally different. And that has been the problem with women in integrating the women in the military, is that we have to recognize everybody's differences, the diversity that goes with it. And we haven't done a good job of that. And so the women that you're talking about have learned to tamp that down and be more of the guys, be more like the guys. And therefore, we don't recognize them as much. It goes back to also is how many of us actually cried in front of a man or a group when, you know, the men get mad and they swear. I would head for my stateroom on the
You know,
ship
you know,
to
my
cry
dad,
because I
I
didn't want anybody to see me cry.
I heard
But
from
that's what
all
we
of
do.
you the mom guilt, but I've been different levels of executive level throughout my very long career, which you won't talk about the years. But any woman who is successful in her career and moves to an executive level has mom guilt. So they learn to live with it. And so that kind of carries over in your later years. You think, well, God, if I'd just been there, maybe they wouldn't be so messed up. You know, I mean, you are making these wrong decisions but what I'm finding with my 9 children and 26 grandchildren is that they're all different. We can only do so much. We keep loving them. We keep believing in them. I give people the example of Jeffrey Dahmer's mother. I saw him on TV years ago. And there was one little lady in the audience with the bun in her hair, still believing in her son sitting in the Jeffrey Dahmer. And that's what mothers do. They never give up. Dads might give up and want to throw them out to the wolves, but the mothers never give up. But anyway,
Thanks.
so we need to help our women veterans. If anyone in this room wants to be on the committee of the Northeast Florida Women Veterans
She's recruiting.
Association,
She's
they
a recruiter.
need our help. We have the 2nd largest population of women veterans in the country, and our great state of Florida just created a director of the Women Veterans Program, Vanessa, and what's her last? Thomas. She's amazing. Between she and Dee and Patty, we're making, and Hammer and the state, we're making amazing, having amazing results with our women, but we need your help.
Thanks, Penny.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Lauren? Yeah.
Thank you, Penny. You're awesome.
Other questions? Go right ahead.
You talked a little bit about, you know, gender not being a denominator, I guess, or not being the thing that you think about. But do you think that you thought differently than if your male counterpart in terms of when you were employed and when you were there? Did you ever think that, would a man be thinking what you're thinking? Did you ever go through that process?
It wasn't something that I focused on. I think there probably was an element of that, but it wasn't something I particularly focused on because I thought everyone was different, right? I mean, everyone brought something to the table, and so to me, especially in a leadership position, was giving everybody the opportunity to talk, everybody the opportunity to weigh in, everybody the opportunity to give their perspective. And the time to listen and hear, contrarian opinions, that type of thing. So the things, here's an example. I am a think to talk person. I am not a talk to think person. Do I associate that with gender? Not really, but I know that about myself. And I also I can notice a talk to think person really quickly. Like, I'm like, oh, that's how they're processing this information. But I don't attribute that with gender. I don't know.
My short answer to that is no. I never thought that what the man was thinking. I might think it from the other person's perspective when they open their mouth and they say something really brilliant. I said, I wish I'd thought that way. And you can see the way they think, but I've never associated that with male, female, the gender identity.
Ditto. Yeah, I feel the same way. What my thoughts were my thoughts, and if I valued everybody else's around me, but I didn't say, if I was a guy, how would I think if I was a guy in this position right now? So.
By the way, if there are questions on the chat, you can ask those now. Other questions here?
Question, comment. I have dad guilt. Just for the record.
Okay.
Great,
That's good
yeah,
to
and that's
know. Yeah,
important.
that's
That's
good to know.
really
Yeah.
important.
Being deployed and away from my sons,
Mhm.
not having a father at home. Yeah, so husband guilt, yeah. You grew up in Saudi Arabia, I heard.
Did.
That must have been quite interesting, I assume. Did that help shape you as a leader in the Navy? I'm just curious if that, your past and overseas in that environment and then becoming an American senior leader, I'm just curious.
I think when I reflect back on it, I do think it was part of, it was part of who my character was, because I was different in Saudi. We weren't on a big compound that was an Americanized compound. My father was a geologist working for U.S. Geological Survey. And so, we were on the economy, and, a little blondie out in town was, stood out. So I think that I had a sense of kind of being uncomfortable early on, and kind of just being different. And I also think that there was a sense of adventure, right? I will say, though, I traveled more as a child than I did in the Navy. Because my parents, we just, when we had time off, we could travel, and we went to Iran. We went to Beirut, we went to Russia. I mean, we did a lot of traveling. So I think that exposure to the rest of the world also was part of kind of my character and how I thought about what our responsibilities were, as carrying out the mission of the United States, is how we presented ourselves overseas was a big part of that also. I had a great childhood.
Geology, that's super cool.
Yeah. We have lots of rocks in our house.
My freshman year at Florida, there was a class that was very popular. It was called Rocks for
For
Jocks.
jocks, yeah. That
It
is
was
everywhere.
hard though. I was like, these jocks, I don't know why they take this.
We even have one of those at the Naval Academy.
Oh, okay.
Rocks for
Rocks,
jocks.
yeah, it's funny. I would like to say to the three of you, unless there are more questions.
Just one.
Oh, and we have one in the back too.
I work with a lot of, the Guard and Reserve and transitioning on the phone. They open up with me about what's going on with them, and some of them I can tell need help. So should I call the commanding officer, or should I call family readiness, or should I call the chaplain with that? I normally just call the chaplain with that branch of service. So I keep a couple of chaplains in my Rolodex. Next, but I want to know your opinion. Where would they get the best help the quickest if they need? I mean, I had one that jokingly kept saying, I'm going to just kill myself. I'm going to kill my, people don't say that to strangers on the phone.
And this
So
is
I
predominantly
called-
veterans,
Or
or is this veterans or active duty?
Well, they're Guard and reservists. Some of
reservists,
them are
okay.
active, some of them are just returning, some are, rarely have they retired and having the challenge. They're serving.
Still serving.
Still serving. Or this one person got his degree and he was going in as an officer, and he was having all kinds of personality issues. I can only imagine when he was assigned his unit. I encouraged him to really respect the people that have been doing the job and learn from them as they're going in and telling them how to do the job.
Mhm.
You know,
I don't think there's one answer for that. A part of it,
it's PTSD or suicide.
yeah, I mean, every one of those is so unique, right? So
Right.
in the conversation, if you can tease out more information about who they're comfortable with, like who's their trusted advisor.
Good idea. Trusted advisor.
You mentioned many of the resources,
Mhm.
chaplains, medical, counselors, there's here, the clinic here. And you want to have their buy-in as much as you can. But if you feel it's a significant risk to their life, then their hotline numbers that you should probably have also that would be helpful. But if it's not at that significant a stage, I guess, and it's hard for you to judge. I think it would be helpful if you know that they say, faith is really important to me, then you may know that it would be good to go to the chaplain. But I also know we have experts in here who are far smarter on this. Did Jody just?
She just
step
ran
out?
out.
She just ran out. But there's some other better
So far, I've
advice.
gone to the Army chaplain and they take over and call them
Yeah.
and communicate with them and find out
Yeah.
what's going on from a faith
I think that's
standpoint.
a very, very,
That's always a safe way to
Right.
go.
Yeah.
If you go to the chaplain will have all the other resources that they needed, but
And I have to
it-
brag, one of my 20 granddaughters is an Army chaplain up at Fort Bragg, jumping out of helicopters.
Good for her.
So she'll be here for the family oyster roast on Saturday after Thanksgiving.
So I think after this meeting, after this is over, you may have people in the audience who are going to come talk to you about
Oh, good.
your resources.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Joe. Penny,
Yes.
two things right here to answer your question. First of all,
oh, yeah, you're gonna talk about Firewatch.
her niece is fabulous.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Right?
No, she's not
Granddaughter.
wrong.
Your
Granddaughter.
Okay, sorry.
No, you haven't.
But, yeah, I wrote a story on it. She's a
Oh, that's
fabulous.
right. Yeah, you're
But-
right.
Right, the Firewatch for
Yep.
yourself, get
Yeah.
the SAVE training. And if you ever, anytime, yourself or anybody else need to know where to go to find any military or veteran resource, you call me or you have them dial 211. And we'll connect them with Cedric at the Army National Guard Fleet Headquarters. So the question.
Can you describe for everyone here, can you explain the Firewatch? Because not everyone understands what the
Oh, wow,
Firewatch
the
is.
general in the room, okay. It might be a really good lens view from his perspective of what I've absorbed from him.
Yeah.
So the Firewatch started out as an individual or a couple of folks who we had this significant suicide problem. And it initially started with the military piece, although it really can cross all genres. And the two impetus out of the Firewatch are these, as I understand it. Then we'll let the general tell you what the real story is. But if you can, there are hotlines, there are resources, and there are those things. But if you can identify where those hot spots might be, or the leaders and the indicators are, or when people are dying, what were they, and then you can triage to it, and then surge to that particular area. For instance, a big Navy warship comes back from being at sea for 6 to 10 months, pulls into port, and all the girlfriends and moms and families and all families get off, and they all go run home and go, oh, we're all fine. What about that seaman that joined the ship 4 months into the cruise, has never been in the home port before, arrives and literally lives on the ship with no real barracks in the base? He's isolated, he's contained. They've identified, now MWRs are responding better and making sure that they're doing activities to go reach off of those. And veterans out in Clay County, the Firewatch was instrumental in working with a national organization. And by doing the homework that they did, they went to 5 counties and said, let's pull health stats, let's dig in, let's go identify where they're at. They found this rural pocket in Clay County where older veterans are killing themselves at a pretty higher rate, and they were able to focus it, pay attention to it, alert the veterans and the communities around it, and identify it was an isolation and a social connection problem. So the scientific of where they might be and where we can surge resources to is one aspect of it. And the other aspect is to your story, Penny, is their Fire Watch Standard program. Only about 10% of us swim in the world of really paying attention to 90% of the community. All they know is now, thankfully, it's a 988 number, not a 10-digit number. I got to try and remember what it is. But with Firewatch and a 30-minute, or if you want to do the deluxe program at 45 and take the 15-minute video on what veterans want you to know about veterans, you get a good sense of when you have that conversation, you know how to have that conversation with them to garner the information you need to then know where do I steer them? Well, how should I respond? It's kind of like CPR, okay? You know, it wasn't extra ambulances and extra doctors that saved people from heart attacks. It was the people around them in the office place or at home who realized how to do CPR that kept them going until those folks could go get there. That's what saved the most lives. So I think the Watch Standard program is kind of that CPR. Now, so I haven't even asked my question yet, but I'll defer to the general and say, did I get close?
Joe, this is Mike Fleming. Yeah, I'm the chair of the Fire Watch. Joe did it better than me. But first, Penny, you don't jump out of helicopters. Let's just be clear. You propel out of helicopters.
I'm seeing her jump out of it.
I'm aerosol qualified. But Joe nailed it, and it's really to engage the 90%. The 90% of the community who wants to do something, but really doesn't know, hey, how can I talk to that veteran? I've never served. I don't have any right to serve, to talk with him. No, you're a friend, and we're trying to surround the community. And Joe is the executive director for Mission United here, and Mission United is 211, and they have a great thing. So when you don't know where to turn, you could just call the 211 here locally here in Northeast Florida.
So I do have a question.
Really?
211 number for Firewatch?
For everything,
Everything. You call me and we'll get it to you. Okay.
211 for everything.
So you made the comment about you got lauded for making the decision to put your family first and do that speech and go to them. I've seen the turnaround. Family wasn't first when I was in the military because they weren't issued in my CBAC. Okay, that was the excuse I was given. And today we're, you know, they clearly weren't first. In the Air Force, they were first, but not in the operational forces. But in today's numbers, we're at the highest number of folks coming into the military with a family. Traditionally, it was young men joined the service, they did their time. If they stayed in long enough, they acquired a family, but by then they knew what they're doing. I know you're out and you're past it, but not that far. Are we teaching family first, the counseling aspects and the awareness to those aspects of our junior sailors in our mid-grade leadership and development of first class E6 chiefs, senior chief? Are we adding that mix into, because the counselings and the trainings that I got in the military were all about operations, and are we adding that extra flavor now to that leadership development at the mid-grade level, and certainly I'm sure they're and at the academy level?
So I believe so.
Yes.
I think that a great example, right? It's an unfortunate example, but about 4.5 years ago, there was big housing crisis on Navy bases with concerns about the quality of housing, right? And there was, in the beginning, when that first came up at the congressional level, there was a lot of this, well, you know, who's asking their sailors how things are at home? Like, you know, who do you have a lease with? Are you getting, you know, whether you're on base or off, et cetera, those types of questions. And there was a little bit of kind of finger pointing, not my job, you know, I'm on the ship, not my responsibility. That's, you know, the base's responsibility and vice versa. But I think there was kind of an awakening then to remind people that that is part of your job description as a leader, right? To know, you know, how your sailors are doing, how their families are doing, and you can't just know that information, right? You have to have a conversation over a period of time for those types of things to come out. And so I do think that it is a big part of the leadership training that occurs at the petty officer level. You know, I'm talking specifically to Navy, but also at the junior officer level, much more so, Joe, than when you and I first started in the service. But I also think it's also has to be a reminder, because when there's a lot on your plate and there's pressure and stress, those are the types of things that get put to the back burner. So there has to be this kind of rinse and repeat, you know, of making sure that that's part of everybody's kind of daily leadership business.
And I have a firsthand example of that going on. I told you my son is a chief petty officer. He pinned on last year, but this year he was a sponsor for a new chief selectee. And I had the opportunity in October to go up to visit with my son and have their group of new selectees in for discussion with the Admiral. And we sat around the fire pit at my son's house with a few genuine chiefs, Huh? And the scars. But I saw this happening in person between the conversations with me about leadership and about taking care of sailors. I saw the sponsors, E8s, E7s and E8s, talking to these new upcoming E7s, these new chief petty officers, about their responsibilities once they put on khaki and been pinned on several weeks later. And I was so impressed. I think it may be a generational push down, because when I was on active duty, that didn't happen with our at the E6 and E7 level, and I saw it happening. So it's becoming more and more ingrained. It was really heartwarming to my heart to hear, they just didn't want to talk to me about operations, but they wanted to talk about the leadership aspect and my disappointments in some leaderships and my what I was most thrilled about. And then they asked these questions about how to take care of their sailors. It was awesome.
As a quick follow, just to wrap up, one thing you said earlier was, it was a little easier back in the day when they, not only can you call home, but they can call you. That's an entirely different animal when you're at sea and that broken refrigerator or broken down call gets dropped in your lap.
Right.
In the middle of the mid-watch on the bridge. And lastly, real quick, because I have the opportunity, Lauren, okay, so I want to say something about you. I've been in this town 22 years, and the number of times that Frank and the team have told the story about how hard you worked and you bugged and you begged, and not begged, but you were there to get the job and the role that you have. And nobody who listens to the sports radio in this town has any doubt that you don't belong there, you don't deserve there, and you don't show them up on a regular basis.
Thank you. Thank you. Wait, before I get to your question, we do have one from the chat. The Cohen clinics provide care for military spouses. What advice would you give this population as it relates to coping with military life transitions?
Military life transitions.
For the military spouses.
So I take that to be when your spouse retires,
Correct, yeah.
okay, or leaves active duty, and all of a sudden your entire social network goes away. You know, those of us, or you move and all your friends are not there anymore. You lose your medical insurance. So it's a transition into that world for the spouses, not just the military member. The advice is, make sure you're watching what's happening to your spouse, that they don't go down the deep end and you don't see it, because you've got your own problems going on. When my husband retired, I retired, you know, we got our own things going on, and we have to watch out for each other and for your kids and make sure that they make that transition. And so places like here that can offer some help. I do know Northeast Florida Women Veterans currently has several veteran spouses that are also veterans, and we have some of those as our clients because they're struggling. Their spouses that are out and deployed, they're former military, now home with 2 kids, and it's hard. It's really hard to make that transition and do it, you know, also as a military spouse.
Mary, did you have more to add?
Well, I was thinking, because when I went through my transition and they have the courses available for flag officers, spouses were included in that. I actually don't know that that's true for, you know, mid-grade, yeah, and certainly for enlisted, but I think that's something that, and I don't know what the VA provides in that category, but that would be an interesting thing to go look at, so.
Did your husband take the course also?
He did, he did, and, you know, for example, he had his own career, right? So, I mean, I think that he, you know, it was not as much as a significant change for us in terms of our lives, but I have some male counterparts whose wives were exclusively, you know, stay-at-home homemakers.
Mhm.
And in one particular example, it comes to mind right away that she's having a very hard time.
Because now he's home.
Well, I don't think it's just,
No?
I think
Okay.
I think it's the loss of identity.
Okay.
It's now, you know, and at a senior level, you go from kind of people know who you are to suddenly you're like no one in a, you know, in a neighborhood. So I think that's kind of unique to senior officer stuff, but I do think there's an identity piece that we all lose, right? Doesn't matter what pay grade you are, but when you transition, you're a veteran, but you're not an active duty or you know, reservist. It's just kind of different. I think there's an identity piece.
And when you're, I'm sorry, and when you are a family unit of a military member, there are family support services on the bases and the posts that reach out to you. So when you cease to be part of the military, that all goes away. And you don't have access to it. And people aren't calling you to say, hey, come out and do this. You have to make your own fun, maybe. The transition's hard, I think.
Like for my friend Donna, when her husband retired, she's on helmets and heels. Going back to your point earlier, Patty, about I do things my way. That's how your husband was doing it. Well, that's how she was doing it. Like, this is the household I run. And now all of a sudden he's home and it's like, no. I've been doing it by myself for 10 years. You can't come in and do it your way. This is my way. And so they had I think an interesting adjustment.
And I think it's important to know what your passions are and go after those passions once you're retired. Because you will have the time to go after them. And that's what's going to keep you busy and feeling like you still are part of something and you belong to some type of group. And it's not going to be a full-time job. Like, you know, every day I have to go and meet with these people. But it's something that, you know, and there'll be more than one passion. Like, you know, I'm involved in several different organizations and they're totally different from each other, but I like them all because I want to be able to give in that way. But that's part of knowing what you are passionate about and going out and helping somewhere in that capacity. It
And that's
helps.
both for the service member
And the spouse, yes,
The
exactly,
spouse has
yes.
to know what they're
Yeah.
passionate about
Exactly.
Absolutely.
to go find that as well.
Well, I think,
Lauren?
yes.
If I may,
Mhm.
Admiral Jackson answered this question to me in an interview process that I had with you. I remember the two things you said about it. One was, and you referred to it earlier, you said two things about your transition, because we spent a lot of time talking about it. You said, A, you really need to be intentional. And you just
Yeah.
have to realize, oh,
It's a
I'm in
job and-
transition.
yep.
What's my plan? And then two, you talked about, I went out there and networked and talked with anybody that I could talk to that had done this before, just to learn their experience. And you were at a different senior level. But the encouragement to the folks on the chat that are having as spouses is, get out there and come talk to a number of us that have done that before and get those different perspectives and experiences. So you learn the way ahead, just the way you were taught in the military, somebody taught you how to do that or shared that experience. You answered, that's how you answered that question.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Good job. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
What is the one thing you want the civilian population to know?
When you hire a veteran, you are hiring more than just a person that comes and works for you. You hire a veteran that has experience galore that can translate very well into any organization you go to, whether it's leadership, learning how to cooperation or teamwork or any of those qualities that we have, amazing qualities that the military people have, all military people have. And not only the military people, but their family members. Our family members grew up the way we do, so they have the same capacities that we do. So our spouses have it also, and our children do too, the resiliency that comes from it. When you're hiring a veteran, you're hiring more than just a person with technical expertise. You're hiring a person that is a whole, more than just that, and you'll be very pleased.
Good.
So I'll zoom way out to a strategic level. What percentage of America do you think serves? Anyone want to guess?
Less than 1%.
It's 1%.
0.7, 0.7, 0.7. And I think that so much of America doesn't know what our service members do and how it affects them on a daily basis. And there are lots of little vignettes to kind of tie that in, but one of them is, you wouldn't get your Starbucks coffee if it weren't for the freedom of the seas and the defense of our nation that our service members are doing every day. And we've come a long way from where we were after World War II. And we have a lot of threats on the horizon that are threats, both internal and external. And I just think it's so important. And I'm reaffirmed when, it's reaffirming to me when people who don't have any connection to the military show an interest. So, I'm a big fan of when you have a Veterans Day event, you don't have a veteran speak. You have someone who can talk about the value of the veterans to the rest of our country. So you hit a nerve on that one.
Teach our children what military service is. It's not for everybody. But get them to recognize that those that do serve, as they grow up, it's best to start at 2, 3, 4, 5, that it is an honorable profession. It is honorable to be able to serve just for 4 years. So many of our country, my fellow citizens, don't teach their children about military service. And the first time they hear about it might be in high school when they hit a recruiter. Should know what it's about, even if they don't serve. I mean, because the military services, we're not going to have more than 1% probably for the foreseeable future, just for funding purposes. But we need to teach our children what a veteran is, what they did, and what it bought us over the years.
I think that was a great question to wrap on. So thank you for providing that. And Elizabeth, who is retired Air Force, submitted this comment. And so I'm going to steal it as my closing statement before I officially close. But she said she wants to thank these inspiring leaders for all their years of service to our defense, local communities, professional groups, and anything she missed. She's very grateful for all that you've done and continue to do. So I think that sums it up perfectly. Our community. Community is lucky to have all of you who are wired for service. We would like to obviously thank Mary, Patty, and Valeria for serving as panelists for this informative town hall. We have recorded the town hall and we'll send it to all the attendees plus the Northeast Florida Veterans distribution list. If anyone else needs the link, please contact the Cohen Clinic here at Centerstone. Thanks to CSX and Boeing for sponsoring this town hall and reaching out and making a difference in the lives of a veteran.
Well done, Lauren. Thanks, everybody.